All right, morning, let's get started. Breach of trust. So far, if you look at all of the chapters that we've covered, let's go to the first page. Go back to the first page, just looking at the topics that you covered. Because now you're at the end to do breach of trust. You have to have a conceptual idea of what exactly is a breach of trust. So go to the very first page when we talk about the core syllabus, which you covered. Right. So we did the basic trust concepts. Then we did the parties to the trust. We did classification of trust, validity of a trust, how a trustee is appointed, their duties and their powers, how they are paid, how you remove or retire a trustee. Then we took on the idea of the administrator, the roles and responsibility as the person who assists the trustee in carrying out his functions. And then we talked about trust accounting, investments, and then the beneficiaries. So before we do breach of trust, now let's put all of those in context. Okay? So when we spoke about basic trust concepts, that was only just an introduction to the different words and what trust is all about. When we moved into parties of a trust, who are the parties to a trust? Parties. We had three parties to a trust. Okay, so we had the beneficiaries. Trustee. The settlor, remember? The donor. This exam is in 2 weeks. So you have to start putting your mind into the terms. Alright? Getting there? Yeah. Okay. You can also have right here. Who's this person? Right in between. Yes. Right in between, you could have the protector. Alright. Yeah, you remember it. Then we went into different classifications of trust. Yeah. So we know that there are all different types of trusts. Give me at least 3. I can give you 1. Discretionary trust. 2. I know why you're blank. You have a charitable trust. And the last one for you. A protective trust. Huh? Then we went to the mechanics of what is a valid trust. So what makes a trust valid? There are 3 certainties. 3 certainties. Yes, you must have the 3 certainties. Yes. You said it must be in writing, but you meant to say, what is the intention? Okay? Alright. So the next chapter, move on to appointment of trustees. How are trustees appointed? Go in your book. How are they appointed? What was that chapter about? Appointment of trustees.
Understanding how trustees are appointed.
How are they appointed?
They have to be a sound mind. It could be an individual or it could be a corporation.
Right.
With the corporation, they have to go through the census, right?
Yes. So it can be a corp or an individual. You can be appointed at the creation of the trust.
Yes. As a substitute for.
A substitute.
Or an additional trustee.
Or additional. And at the creation, you know how a person becomes a trustee, because the settlor comes to the person who's an individual or to a company and says, I want you to be a trustee. Now, remember, here, a person can walk here. Hi. Morning. A person can walk here to a company and become and ask the company to create a trust. But you also can have someone who dies and they appoint an executor in their will who automatically becomes a trustee of the assets. So there are two ways. One, a person walking into a company to create a trust, and the second one is when someone dies. So let me put the person dying like this, as if they're laying down. Okay? Inter vivos, and then death. Then the next chapter was the duties, morning, and powers of trustees. What did you learn there? She has help now. She was all alone. Duties and powers. Why are you busy writing? Answer the question. You plenty time to write. Well, not really, but because I know I get to drop out of what's on. Duties and powers. What did you learn when we spoke about duties and powers?
Duties. There's three broad categories: management, administrative. And propriety. Property. These are.
See what you're reading.
It's one way.
So what did each one mean? What is management?
Investing and managing the distribution of trust, property, reasonably fairly, and accurately.
Okay, that's my next one. This chapter, this one right here, is what you need to know for breach of trust.
Chapter 6.
Which chapter?
6.
Then we spoke about retirement, no, remuneration, and then retirement and removal.
So, this is, I know I can late, but what is it that we're basically going over?
We're getting the breach of trust.
Just a breach of trust, types of trust.
No,
No, no.
what I
but
started by telling her,
Uh-huh.
let's recap what you covered, so you see how it links to the last chapter, breach of trust.
Oh,
Yeah, because I don't want you to think of breach of trust in isolation. Because when you answer the exam question, in your mind, you may just answer based on that chapter. You understand what I mean? If I give you a question and I ask you, was there a breach of trust by the trustee? In your mind, you're going to say, okay, that's chapter 14. This is what chapter 14 said. But to get to breach of trust, you need to go through certain chapters. Now you getting me? You'll see in a minute. Look at your face.
yeah, I mean, I ain't gonna lie, I kind of nervous on, what it is that we're going to be going over as far as what's the exam is pretty.
We could do that very shortly. We're doing our introduction before we go into the chapter.
No problem.
Before we go into the chapter, we're going to talk about the exam and how you wish for it to be written. We were just waiting on more people to come. But if this is what I have, by the time I finish this, then that's it. Once you all agree to what it is, that's it.
I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So this is what you have to know the chapter to understand breach of trust. So the next chapter was on remuneration, and the other one was on what? Retirement.
Yeah.
And appointment of trustees. So you need to know that one for breach of trust. Or removal. Oh yeah, because we did appointment already. And the next one was investments or accounting. Or the role of the administrator?
Yeah.
Okay, the administrator. Remember what I said? Huh? Remember the last time when I said the role of the administrator? That role is just the person that assists the trustee and their duties and responsibilities. Next one was investment, and then accounting. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, investments. Accounting, and then beneficiaries. Mm-hmm.
Nice role of trust, then accounting.
Role of
Then
administrator.
investment, accounting, then investment.
Oh, that's what I said. I thought it was the other way around.
Then beneficiaries as well.
Okay. And for breach of trust, you must know this one, investments, and you must know this one, beneficiaries. So all of these chapters lead into breach of trust. So in order to understand what is a breach of trust, you must know this chapter in detail. This one, you need to know if you are a trustee and you're being removed or you're being retired, you must know where your liability lie. So that's why you need to know this chapter. For investments, you will see when we begin, this is where the beneficiaries who have rights bring an action against a trustee. Because a trustee has a duty under management to invest. And the beneficiaries have a right to sue. What you think, Ken? Speak.
I only
Understand my writing?
discretionary trust.
No, I've just given 3 examples for the chapter because we started from the beginning.
Okay.
Well, I thought that was the most important.
Which one?
Them three.
No, these 3 are the most important ones for you to answer a question on breach of trust. And for you to understand when I give you a question whether or not there is a breach in your mind. You don't go straight to 14 and say, when you read the scenario and say, oh yes, this is a breach. The beneficiaries can sue because the trustee didn't do what he's supposed to do. In your mind, you have to start by saying, okay, what were the duties and the powers of that trustee?
So basically reading a case.
Yeah.
And
An issue, something happened,
something happened.
and they have the right to sue.
The beneficiaries.
They have certain rights, so you have to know what their rights are. That's the chapter before this one, right? And
But
you have to look at what duty or power was the trustee to exercise, or which one did he exercise. And then here, if it is an investment, you need to know what's the requirement of a trustee under his duty to invest. Got it?
I got you.
Okay. So we be good now, right? Yes? No? Maybe so? What you mean maybe?
Maybe so, you see. Yes, continue.
Alright.
You don't know till you get there.
I don't know what that means.
No?
What does that mean?
You'd be surprised how much your mind would hold and how much you'd be able to grasp through, when it's placed in front of us.
You mean an exam?
Yeah, when that happened, then
It ain't that bad. So let's start with cut it off like this. So you know when there's a breach of trust, it's between this person and this person. So, trustee. What is the standard requirement for a trustee?
And the fulfill beneficiaries' best interest.
And what else?
ensure counsel and good standing.
There we go. That's the first thing. You remember that chapter? Oh Lord. He has to review the trust documents. Remember? He has to ensure that the property is vested. What else he has to do? When he is reviewing, he has to make sure there's been no breach.
No breach, right?
For fraud and.
Yes. Now you see how all the chapters are coming together? If it is a new trust, he wouldn't be looking for this.
Right.
He'll just be making sure that the settlor has the legal and equitable title to the property before it vests in him. If he's becoming the trustee by death, how would that one work?
Who would have died?
Who would have died?
Mm-hmm.
You mean like one of the beneficiaries?
No, won't be the beneficiaries, it'll be the executor. How would that work? Because once you become an executor, you become a trustee.
So you're saying like if the settler dies before they finalize everything or
No,
whatever?
no.
It's already
So
finalized
even if
when he
it's a
dies.
No,
trust already.
this here is someone walking in to a company to establish a trust, or someone coming, living, and say, listen, I want you to hold these properties and trust for me for whatever purpose. So it can be a corporation or a company. A trustee can also arise when someone dies with a will, leaves an executor. That executor becomes a trustee because he has the fiduciary duty to carry out the will of the deceased. So if I'm over here and I say, what are the duties of this trustee? When that person dies and he is appointed as an executor, what are his duties?
To carry out the will. Ensure that it's carried out properly. Or as per will.
What it'll do is make sure to review it. Make sure
He has to do the same. He has to review the will. And what else? Make sure that the person own all of the property that they say that they own. The same thing. He has to check the properties. And what else?
And then the people who it's supposed to be.
Yes. He has to go and find the beneficiaries.
Like you see, I know these things, are you telling me?
Yeah. And if there are any creditors.
Yeah.
Remember, whether the person died or they did it inter vivos, this person has what duty? What's the duty of the trustee? Overall, one word, fiduciary duty. And that's key. You must know what that means. What does fiduciary duty means? You have an idea? Okay, give me the idea.
Basically, to continue on what we do, like.
Just like a legal duty.
Yeah,
Financial responsibility.
All over the place. And you're taking this exam in 2 weeks? Yes? I listening. I'm listening. Yes.
Who holds the legal right to it?
And let me see where it's just in your notes. Yes, it's right there. Go to page 48. There you go. See it? And you see that case there?
When is it exactly?
What?
The exam.
In 2 weeks.
Yes, I know, but the date.
13. Next week is the last class.
No, I understand that. I have a wedding to attend.
Just do it before. Do it on a Wednesday, do it on the Thursday, do it on Friday. Then you just have less time.
I got to be flying out.
So when are you taking it? Because if you say after, you will have to study twice as hard. Because you have that break.
So
You see what I'm saying? Because you have to go to a wedding, come back from the wedding, get settled in, and then you want to take the exam, you have to start all over. Whereas it's right here, right now, take it. Because you will have a totally different exam from the one we're going to discuss. I'll have to write you a new exam. It should be all on your own way. Or you take the one with them.
I think you want that.
Well, that's some heat.
What you mean? You should have been studying all along. When I left you, boy, y'all on a roll. Y'all like this.
I
All
understand
life
that,
has happened.
but exactly.
Be quiet. But life happens. Not you.
Things do come unexpectedly.
Yes, I know that.
I would have beyond my control, but you know I do the best I could. So
Okay.
that's all you can
So
do.
just take it before. When you traveling? Which day?
I will leave the 12th to be there for the 13th. So
That's Friday. So take it Tuesday or Wednesday.
just
Could you see what I'm saying? When we meet next week Saturday, we will be reviewing what's on the exam. You'll know in your mind where to focus yourself to study.
Mm-hmm.
If you wait until after you come back, you wouldn't know where I'm coming from. You see what I mean? Because I'd write you a different exam. It's up to you.
you want that smoke.
Huh?
See, we want all that heat.
Lahi? What is that?
The heat means
The heat? Oh.
the exam, another exam that we ain't even going over.
No, be you.
Me. I know.
Not them. They could be here.
Sorry, what you were saying?
I still got a wedding to go to. We discussing on
Yeah.
what I should. That's me. I should take it before.
All right.
Oh, she was saying that she was gonna take it again.
No, he didn't take it by himself.
Oh, she'll change it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So when we speak about this word fiduciary duty, once you see that word, what should click in your mind is this case. Bristol and West Building Society versus Marthal. That should click in your mind.
Bristol
Automatically.
versus what?
That's it, Bristol versus Mothau, M-O-T-H-E-W, page 48. Whenever you see that word, a trustee and his fiduciary duty, whenever you see that word fiduciary, click in your mind this case,
Versus or south.
page 48.
Okay.
And when this clicks in your mind, that click right here takes you right there.
To these and power of trustee.
And takes you to our topic, breach of trust. So if you haven't read it, read it. You only need a summary of what Bristol says. Bristol sets out what a fiduciary duty means. It says a fiduciary must act in good faith. Remember that? Number one, he must act in good faith. He must not make a profit out of the trust. That's number two. He must not place himself in a position where his duty and his interests may conflict. interests may conflict. Start again. Okay? He must act in good faith. He must not make a profit out of his trust. He must not place himself in a position where his duty and his interest may conflict. He may not act for his own benefit. He may not act for his own benefit or the benefit of a third person without the informed consent of his principal. Informed consent of his principal. And that list is not exhaustive, because it depends upon the nature and how the actual trust deed is written. What's the next standard of requirement? Standard requirement for trustee. You gave me the very beginning, and then what's the next thing he has to do? You need a clue? This chapter you must know. The next thing has to do with the day-to-day running and management of the trust. Six. This one here. And in carrying out this, he has what? When he does the day-to-day running of the trust, he has a duty of care. And that duty of care again speaks to his fiduciary duties as to what he should not do. Why are y'all looking around? This one looking around. I don't know what he's thinking. I have no clue.
You can never guess.
What is the problem? You trying to figure out when you should take the exam?
You're on a good track.
You wondering if you're ready?
Have to.
You should be ready. If you ain't ready, something wrong. You can't wait to study at the last day. You're supposed to have been studying all along. Correct? Yes?
See?
Okay, say C then.
Yes.
In carrying out the day-to-day running of the trust, a trustee has powers and he has duties. Correct? What's the powers?
You mean like him being able to use his discretion if it's his discretionary trust?
There we go. See, somebody thinking. Let's go. What else? They waiting on you. Cause I can see this fright in your eyes. Like, oh my God, will I be ready? Will I be ready? Or should I wait and take the chance 2 weeks after? Don't focus on that. Focus on this.
Starting on Friday.
He's still looking. Let's go. Powers and duties. Okay, powers and duties. What's the duty of a trustee? And what is powers?
The duty is to carry I don't know, to invest, to do stuff the right way, and to care for the beneficiaries.
Duties to make sure each beneficiary is.
Which chapter has the duties? Go back.
This is chapter 6, page 49.
Page 49 says a trustee must become acquainted and familiarize himself, treat all the beneficiaries fairly and impartially, give account for his trust funds and trust investments, invest trust property, protect and preserve, keep the beneficiaries informed, not to make a personal profit, not delegate the performance of their duties, and act prudently in the administration of the trust. 49. And that list is not exhaustive.
Do you have to know all, or you could just know like 3 or 4?
No, see what I tried. I was going in the beginning. It's not a verbatim. Based on the situation I give you, you then have to determine whether or not a trustee breached a particular duty. And only way you know what that duty is if you know all the duties. And you have to select which one it is. Because that's what breach of trust is all about. Did the trustee do what he was supposed to do? In order to know what it is that he did, you must know what he should have done. And to do that, you have to know what were his duties, and next one, what were the powers that were given to him in the trustee. So who read the trustee at the back of the book? Because the powers are there. Why are your arms folded? Your arms have never been folded. What is this?
Nothing. Analyzing each action, you gotta be careful.
Not being careful.
No, right.
It's a lot of reading, Lord.
Now listen here. Don't go there.
That was one of the thoughts. Go over.
So we'll go to the deed, asset protection trustee. What were the powers given to this trustee?
Page 506.
Mm-hmm.
Powers and immunities of trustee.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee shall, in relation to the trust property, have all the same powers as a natural person acting as the beneficial owner of such property, and without prejudice thereto, and to all statutory powers and immunities, shall have the powers and immunities set up there, without being limited to any specific powers expressed herein, provided that the trustee shall not exercise any of the powers so as to conflict with his fiduciary duties, or with the beneficial provisions of this trust, or to infringe any restrictions expressly imposed therein upon the exercise of any powers.
Okay, so in general, what did it say? What are his powers?
How do you get all the power to invest?
He has the power to act as if the property is actually his.
Yeah.
To manage responsibly.
Yeah, and he must act within the law. He has all the immunities that are provided within the law, but he must also be mindful that he has fiduciaries, he has beneficiaries, and under his fiduciary duty is to make sure that he doesn't breach any of his duties. Any other powers given to him specifically in the legislation, I mean in the deed? specific there, Joe. But anyhow, let's go. What other powers he has?
Well, I had said management of the trust, and she said investing.
Yeah. You don't see management of the trust. That's the clause we just read. He has all the powers.
Right.
Now the next one is he has a power to invest. That's 510.
Oh, so it lists them out.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
See, because you have the duty to invest, which is a part of his fiduciary duty, because he has to protect and preserve, and he also has to generate an income from the investment for the beneficiaries based on the life of the trust. So here, his powers, the trustee said power, he has a general investment power. They made it general. There are no specifics. And so you would have read in the earlier chapter when you did investments that he has to develop a strategy based upon the assets, the beneficiaries, the duration of the trust. So you already know that. But how this is general, if nothing else is written, then if this is written under the laws of the Bahamas, then you go to the Trustee Act, which guides them as to what they can do and cannot do. So here, the deed gives them a power to invest. That power means to exercise his discretion as to how to maintain the strategy and make the objective that the trustee feels is in the best interest of the beneficiaries. On the other hand, he also have a duty to invest, an inherent duty in that function. So the power is to go out and make the purchases and the sale. His duty is he must carry it out prudently in the best interest of the trust and in the best interest of the beneficiaries. And it must not conflict with the trustee. Get an idea now how the exam question will be worded? Okay. He has the power to acquire property, no duty to balance or diversify investments, no duty to oversee companies, a power to retain family property, power to permit persons to use and enjoy property, power to lend or hire out property, power of appropriation, power to value the trust fund, power to determine where monies or are capital or income. You see that one? You did the chapter on accounting?
Yeah.
Okay. And remember in accounting, what did we say? What goes to capital and what goes to income?
The capital would be the monies that initially starts out the trust fund.
That's the corpus.
Right. And then whatever profit you make from that
The income
is income capital.
But when you're talking about the expenses, how does it work for accounting purposes? You remember?
I'm just trying to say it.
That's this one right here.
I know, I was wondering they were talking about it too.
And I wrote it down because he had it on two separate sides, capital and income.
I think I missed that one.
You missed that
I think
class?
you did.
Oh,
I missed two classes.
which two? This one and this one?
Well, I made it as when you first came in, I missed that. And then I know I missed in the beginning another class.
Oh,
So when he went over that,
these are the examinable areas.
I know, even though you were saying, capital is always what you start with, even when you make money from the asset, it have to go back to the capital, and mix it with the income. The income is only should be the profit. But it's saying something like that. I know by saying it right, but I remember the conversation.
Go ahead. What do you do with the expenses?
expenses have to come out first. I know that.
So where do you take the expenses from? Because like she said, there are two sides. There's income and then there's capital.
Well, you have some capital expenses. That would be like property tax. Like that.
What else?
Boy, back to
The
high school
expenses
accounting.
could come from the income.
Okay, so in the chapter we gave you the general rules of how to appropriate expenses, whether to income or capital. Okay? This trustee here tells the trustee what to do.
So it could vary from
Yes.
deed to deed. Okay.
So it says here, let's say if they didn't have this in here, then he would follow the general trust accounting rules that you read. But here it says, the trustee may determine as the trustees in its discretion think fit and the law may permit, whether any monies for the purpose of this trust be considered as capital income, and whether out of the capital income any taxes, expenses, outgoings, or losses shall or ought to be paid or borne. But unless the trustee shall otherwise determine, all dividends and other income received by the trustee shall be treated as income as the date of receipt, whether or not such dividends or other income shall have been earned wholly or partially in respect of a period prior to the date of receipt. So in this trustee, the settlor has already agreed as to how he wants the funds to be expensed and distributed. Then the power to pay taxes. Yes, that in here also. Power to employ agents. And remember, the Trustee Act has a section with regard to employing agents. The power to effect life insurance. The power to purchase annuities. The power to form companies. The power to trade and carry on business. The power to accept further property. The power to insure. The power to enter into contracts and incur obligations. Power to create other trusts or settlements. Power to give warranties. Power to compromise rights. Conversions of companies into unlimited companies. Winding up dissolution and liquidation of companies. Exercising of voting rights. Power to act as directors and employees of companies. Power to use nominees. Power to employ investment advisors. Power to give proxies and powers of attorney. Power to transfer trust property to another company. And then there's disclosure. So you see how he has set out all of the powers that he's given to his trustees to exercise his discretion. It's in your book.
I know, I definitely.
And then in here he gives the indemnities, and 53, the former trustees. So all of that comes under the day-to-day running and management of the trust. So now let's move to breach of trust.
These topics you wrote here, those are exam topics?
No, we was going over all the chapters in the book and how they link to breach of trust. Okay. So what is a breach of trust?
And the trustee does something that harms the beneficiary or is not in the best interest. It's just my own little thing.
Your own little thing? Anybody else? What's a breach?
When he misuses the trust for own benefit.
Anything you do wrong, maybe.
I'm looking for a word.
A breach of trust would be.
If you don't carry your distribution,
Looking for a word.
really did.
Unlawful?
No. You were getting warm in the last one. Miss a word.
If he does not carry out his duties
In accordance with the trustee.
That's it. That's what a breach of trust is. She just read it from the book.
No, he didn't.
That's what a breach of trust is. He doesn't carry out his duties in accordance with the trustee. So a trustee owes a duty of care and skill in carrying out his duties and responsibilities. And we've already gone through all of that. Because we know to be a trustee, especially if you're a professional one, there are certain skills and qualifications required for that job. The trustee must act honestly and in good faith in carrying out his duties to the beneficiaries and the trust. Ordinarily, if a trustee performs his duties strictly in accordance with the law and the terms of the trust, he should never be in breach of trust. So that preamble tells you certain things. He has a duty of care and skill. If you don't have the skill, then what do?
Find someone else who
You have
does.
to get someone.
Well,
You must employ an agent. Employ an agent. Trustee Act. What section? What do you mean now I done it? Say you have your trustee act, would you? There's certain sections you have to know. What's the section for the duty to invest?
You have to know that for the test from the Trustee Act.
Powers of investment, section 4.
Part 4. Is it part 4? What happened? There's certain things you have to know. We started out that you should not have fallen off when I left. You have to know the section for investments. You have to know what the law says with regard to investments. Part 2, and then all those sections. What section is the power to employ agents? And then there's a section, the power to delegate. Go in the 30s. So you write an index.
Power to apply income to maintenance to accumulate surplus.
Go down.
Power to apply capital money for advancement or benefit.
Should have done that when you did accounting.
That's this window.
Is this actual one?
Yeah.
Or I have to tell them? Okay, I'm Thompson, gotta have a look at that.
This Graham Thompson building.
You don't see it? And the next one. There we go. So you already know there's some sections you need to know.
What does agent refer to? I mean, to do
An accountant, a lawyer, tax specialist.
That the same as delegation?
No. Delegation means you're hiring someone to actually carry out the function. So, he has a duty of care and skill that he must have to administer the trust. And he has to act honestly and in good faith. and executing his duties to the beneficiaries and the trust. And ordinarily, if a trustee performs his duties strictly in accordance with the law and the terms of the trust. So, that means that not only must you know what's in the trust deed, like how we just went through it, you also must know what's in the act. And that's why certain sections are important that you need to know. What's the one for indemnification? What's the one for disclosure?
There's a lot to know.
No, it's not.
Yes.
No.
This whole book and then the sections of the trustee.
What's the one for disclosure?
You have to go back and read.
I don't like you looking so pensive, you know. That ain't you. You just be on the ball. Let's go.
I know.
Getting scared?
Wow.
I can see it. Disclosure. Gone too far.
This is disclosure to the beneficiaries. Do we have to say exactly what it says, or just
What?
know the section?
No, you should have it in your own words.
Okay.
How long the exam for?
3 hours.
How much question?
Whatever this one is.
You ready?
Yeah, we were
How
wrong,
much
yeah.
question?
Just come off the government website.
Yeah, this is the wrong one.
That's the wrong one?
No, name on the side. It's section 83. So look what they have here.
Reception and retransmission of broadcast and cable system.
Yeah, that's wrong. This is disclosure. Oh, it's raining? Oh,
And it was overcast, so okay.
I know my mind don't leave me wrong. That was not amended. Go to the index and make sure you put disclosure. So when you did the chapter last week, you should have done the chapter on beneficiaries in connection with section 83 of the Trustee Act.
I could be honest,
But
I
this
haven't
says,
printed that
this
out
says disclosure.
because
First doesn't, I don't know. Where you printed yours from? Yeah, but not at home. What thing? Where you printed yours from?
Laws online.
Where you printed yours from? The FSPA. Yeah, she went to BFSP.
Interesting.
Go to BFSP.
What's that?
Bahamas Financial Services Board website, then go to legislation, and then print it from there. Why?
you could charge me for a book.
That's not a book.
How many pages? Book could be 5 pages.
Hold on. This exam is in 2 weeks, and you have not read this yet? Moving on. You sure you don't want to reprint it? Probably don't.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that title.
Yeah.
Everything else.
So a beneficiary, as equitable owner of trust property, may bring a personal claim against a trustee for breach of trust. Why are you smiling?
Because you keep looking at me?
Because you look so pensive, that's why. And that could be for his fiduciary, any other duties. And I have the case here of Target Holdings versus Red Ferns. That case just established that a beneficiary can bring a personal gain. In order for there to be a breach of trust, there must be a breach of some duty. And that's key. That's why I took you all the way back to here. You must know what the duties of a trustee to know if there is a breach.
Sorry, what is the case again?
What?
What's it?
Target Holdings just established that a beneficiary can bring a personal claim against the trustee. The damages recoverable for breach of trust in equity are the same as damages that are recoverable for negligence or breach of contract in common law. The beneficiaries have to prove that there was a breach of trust. Just if you say I'm negligent, you have to prove that I was negligent. If there's a breach of contract, we have to say, all right, you were at fault. This is what you didn't do in accordance with the terms of the contract. And that's the same thing with a breach of trust. This was your duty. You didn't carry it out. Exercising duty of care and acting in the best interest of the trust and the beneficiaries. And you should have already read the case of Nestle versus National Westminster, because that's the leading case for investments. So the measure of liability for breach of trust is the loss, direct or indirect, caused to the trust, which is normally compensatory and not punitive. There's no penalty. You have to return the money. The onus is on the claimant, in this case the beneficiaries, to establish the link between the action and the loss suffered. Anyone look up the case of Miller's Trust deed? Yes? No? Maybe so? Did you look it up? You're only doing is smiling. I thought you had a passion for this.
Leading more into it, I realized how invested you have to be.
Invested? What do you mean?
It's a long life lasting thing. Meaning, if you are the person dealing with a trust, right? I have to make sure going forward that it continues on. So, how I break myself out of this trust if the beneficiaries don't agree that I could leave. How do you take yourself out of a trust if you don't no longer want to be there?
You can retire.
See? But what if you don't want to retire? You just don't want to deal with
the beneficiaries? As a trustee, go to court.
See, I don't be into all this court business.
So you changing your mind already, and you haven't even started yet?
I understand that, but then still, it's great knowledge because I would like to form my own trust. Through the blessings of the Almighty Lord, and do that.
Go as a company,
you be the
not
one
as an individual.
nagging the trustee now.
I know. It's good to know what he's supposed to do and when he's trying to,
Did anyone read the case of Bartlett versus Barclays? What happened?
Okay, so give me some
Bartlett versus Barclays. That case had to do with trustees holding a controlling interest in a company and exercising their fiduciary duties. It's online.
There's one thing when you.
Because I feel like this law school now.
This is trust. This is law.
There's a lot.
This is law.
It is a lot, but then
you're only doing trust.
You only come in with one perspective of what you think it is, and that's where it kind of knocks you left.
How? What do you mean?
I understand. It was dealing with trust and dealing with people I important.
Yeah,
You
go
know?
ahead.
And moving forward, making sure managing it. Basically, what it is now, yes, but then how in depth it is. Like,
Yeah, because you have to make a
exactly.
return for the trust and for the beneficiaries.
Yeah, but then if you don't make
Yeah.
that, and that just opens my mind more to like, wow, I didn't know it was that.
Oh, that's what you meant. Okay, I
Yeah.
get you now. I get you.
So it kind of like throws you in a different direction. Say, hold on, am I prepared to make
To
these
take
right
that
decisions
take that
and
risk.
these risks, because I could also lose all of what is mine to keep this trust going. You know, basically,
Yeah, you could be sued.
you could be sued for for whatever funds that
Mhm.
ain't that you didn't take care of.
Mhm.
So that's a big responsibility. I know, like
Yeah, I know.
I could be living good now.
Well, how would you say is the trust industry in the Bahamas in terms of what he's talking about? Are there people willing to, like, say for insurance, for instance, which is oversaturated? What about, and then I guess you could say criminal law is kind of oversaturated.
Mhm.
Well, how would you say trust law is in the Bahamas in terms of practitioners?
You mean in terms
A
of you
lot
have
of
a
people
lot of
in
them?
that, yeah.
A lot of
People that
arguments.
stick with it.
They stay in it.
A lot of people in
You
there
can't really
doing
just
these
jump out of it.
You
offshore.
can't
That's the
jump out
thing.
of it
Okay.
because this is a particular skill.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I talk about duty of care and skill. So you would come in like you all as an administrator. You have to start at the bottom
Mm-hmm.
because you have to understand the documents, understand the clients, understand the law, and then you move up.
And that's another thing.
Because after this, then after you finish in here, then you move to step, which is the international certification. And then you have to then specialize in the area that you're good at. Is it investments? Is it strategizing? Is it interfacing with the client to see what the client wants? Are you gonna go to the legal side of being an administrator? Or are you gonna move to the side of the person who actually does all of the amendments to the trustee? Are you gonna be a tax expert in the areas that you're working in? And then overall, when you get to the top, are you gonna be the person or you're gonna go to the accounting line? What's the section on accounting? You can go in the accounting side of it. Or overall, you're the trustee who's looking at the business, looking at the trust, looking at the market, where we need to go.
Looking along the lines of finding the people.
A relationship manager.
In a relationship manager, finding those people who's willing to.
So then you have to know what is a trust. What can a trust do for someone?
Mm-hmm. And that's just selling
the product.
The product.
And each trust company has its own product.
Yeah, so that's
their way of structuring their trust.
That's the long lines where I see myself basically selling the product, but going in as in
one aspect.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there are many different avenues you could take in this.
But you gotta pass this face.
Boy, look at that. But that's the thing. Y'all ain't got no attended class.
No what? Attended class? No, not for this one. Not for this. No.
Oh goodness. Because it's actually been I don't know. It just returned my interest in a certain way. That's all. When you really invest it, and how in depth it is.
Yeah, but like I said, there are different avenues.
Mm-hmm.
So you have people who come.
Did you take?
Me?
Yes.
I studied trust law as a specialty in law school.
Okay. What would you say the safest route to go?
There's no safest route. It has to be something that you're interested in and you're good at. You have to be good at this.
Yeah.
This is not a hit or miss.
No.
This is not I'm always going to my book to find the answer. This is what you find. This is what you find when people are in the financial sector. You either know or you don't know.
You gotta specialize.
There's no guessing. So if you're going in a particular area, you tailor yourself for that area and you get the knowledge that you need. So if you were doing accounting all along, say you were doing accounting, you know how to do accounting in different businesses. You now got a job in a bank, finally, or a trust company, and you say, okay, I know accounting, but I want to do trust accounting. So to make that switch from here to there, you have to learn trust law, because you have to know what you're accounting for, and you have to know why you're accounting. And then when you have the numbers before you and someone say, oh, that goes to income, that goes to expenses, you have to have that knowledge to say, let me see the trust deed, let me see the company policy, and let me look at the law to see what the law says I should be doing. And then let me look at what's best practice when there is a gap. And that best practice come from all of your learning from class, which means looking at all of these same cases to see what is the common law principle. What have the courts decided in these matters? And that kind of research to do that, you do that when you go home. Because when you get to work, you got to know where to put this, where to put that, where to put that, where to put that. And when you don't know, you go home and you use your resources. So if you don't have an idea of what trust law is, you cannot work in an accounting function following what somebody says. Because the trustees at the top could be sued for breach of trust. And then you as the lowly person will just be terminated.
See, that follows you, so.
And it follows you.
See,
because the community is very small.
Exactly.
It's a small pool of experts.
But the reward is great.
Yes.
You go for the reward.
It's not, I told you that from class 1.
I understand that, but I can be honest with you, it was the reward is what I'm going for in that regard of,
what I could do with him? Let's go. I don't know what to do with you.
Then
why are you looking at them?
No, I'm trying to figure out everyone have a real keen interest in a lot of reward. Because I will make it to be something in life, but also I think this is most people's choice for the reward. I can't talk for them.
Yeah, they ain't saying nothing. They quiet. Anyhow, breaches can range from serious misconduct, that is misappropriation of trust funds, to innocent breaches, that's just failure to follow directions. And there are some examples I've given you here. Wrongful distribution of income or capital by a trustee. 86. The incorrect exercise of a trustee's discretion. Not distributing income or capital as required by the terms of the trust. You see how it is so important that you read the trustee. Right back to it, you have to read it. This is the pillar of what breach of trust is all about. When you don't do what you're supposed to do, when you don't know what you're supposed to know. Improperly selecting and supervising agents. When you read that section 30, there's a duty on you. If you go out and you say, I employ ABC Company Limited to prepare my accounting, you better be sure that ABC Company Limited know how to do trust accounting. Which means that whoever the company is carrying it out, the person must have some background and experience in carrying out trust accounting.
How much years?
It depends. It depends on the accounting that you require. If you're just dealing with some simple trust, then it may not be that much. If you're dealing with complex structures that have underlying companies, then you need someone with a lot of experience and with adequate staff to carry it out in the time frame that you want it done. There's a lot of consideration when you're employing an agent.
So that's basically big corporations that have this trust. You would go ahead and find someone who has an experience in that.
Like you hire Deloitte or Ernst
To do your auditing. Or you have a special
Now
issue.
there's just an individual trust. It wouldn't too much matter in a sense. Meaning like it's only my fund. My funds.
Means it's just you being a trustee for someone else.
Exactly.
You might not have to, if you have accounting skills, and it's very simple. Yeah.
It's not so much accounting.
No.
Hello? Right.
Misappropriation of trust funds for a trustee's personal expenses and benefit. You cannot use funds out of the trust account. You cannot take it out, even if you say you can put it back in an hour. It is not allowed.
Well, that ain't your money.
Yeah, but people do move things that are not theirs.
It's true.
Failure to obtain the relevant consent as required by the trust instrument. Again, you see this talking about you must know the trust instrument, because there are certain things that require the beneficiary's consent. Purchasing trust property without authorization from the trust and or beneficiaries. So sometimes the trustee can say you can purchase property, but it also stipulates when you need consent, and you have to follow that.
A discretionary, you wouldn't need the consent. You could, because you have the power to purchase and lease or invest as you will, as you wish.
Unlawfully profiting from the trust as selling something for one price, but you have recorded in the trust a lower price and then taking the difference. Investing trust funds in unauthorized or unsuitable investments, and you all did that in the investment section. Once you have your strategy and your objective, you have to follow that. But also bear in mind the wishes of the settlor, when he would have said, well, I don't wish for you to, let's say he has lung cancer. He may say, when you set up my strategy to invest, I don't want you to invest in low tobacco products. That's his wish.
Or the new thing now, grow houses, marijuana.
Yeah, he may say that. He may have let's say he has a son who's on drugs. It may be cocaine or whatever it is. But he may say, I don't want you to invest in none of this marijuana, none of these medicinal medicines that's going on that can become addictive. I don't want you to invest in them. Then failing to account to the beneficiaries. That's what this chapter you just did last week. You have a duty to the beneficiaries. What's that duty? What's the duty to the beneficiaries? It says you're failing to account to the beneficiaries. You have a duty to account. What does that duty entail?
To give them the information.
What information?
Account of funds and investments.
Trust accounts. The overall performance of the trust.
Anything else?
Their own personal benefit accounting.
Can I see hers?
No.
No,
Why?
because you have to reach to that information.
Because it may cause
Conflict.
conflicts.
Can I see the trustee?
Who? Them.
The
The
beneficiary.
beneficiaries.
They can't see the
Yeah, it's just the
minutes.
minutes on the.
They can see
They
the
can see
trustee.
it.
They
They
can't
can
see the minutes.
Can't see the minutes. And they can't see the deliberations.
No.
That's of the trust committee.
But they could get
Accounting statement. And in some instances they have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
$300.
It depends.
It could be whatever.
It depends on the size of the trust. So the remedies that are available to the beneficiaries for trust law is just like in common law. An injunction. What's an injunction? We have it all the time.
I'm going to guess and say the word pause.
Yes. Stop what you are doing. Is to restrain the trustee from doing whatever action. So say we was about to sell a piece of property. The beneficiaries can go to the courts and say we want an injunction to stop it. Stop. That's what an injunction is.
It's funny that even though that might have been that was something that the settler requested died, then they said, we'll put a stop to this. Meaning like if settler requested certain things in place and the beneficiaries did not agree for that to happen, that can still account for, meaning he could start if the court says settlor said.
The injunction from the court means stop, which means you go back. And then you have to look at the decision. If the decision is carried out, will it be in the best interest of the trust and the beneficiaries? And the beneficiaries have to prove that it will not be in their best interest. So let's say if the settlor had said, in the first 3 years, I want you to sell this building. At that time, it didn't make sense. We couldn't get the value for it.
Right.
But we weren't incurring any losses. So we're 25 years down the line now. That's why you said the beneficiaries died. These are the children of them. Now you want to sell it. You could have sold it for $800,000 then, but now you want to sell it for $400,000. They will file an injunction
Okay.
because you should have done it then. You want to do it now, and we're gonna incur a loss.
Yeah.
They look at all of that. Because they haven't, they have the equitable rights in this whole arrangement. They're entitled to their returns. If it's discretionary, you have to wait until the trustee says you are getting. But if you are one in a fixed trust, where it says every month you're getting $5,000, they will know I can't get my money. So in Buttle versus Sanders, an injunction was granted to restrain a sale of trust property for a price lower than that offered by a prospective purchaser. And Fox, the court granted an injunction to restrain trustees from distributing an estate contrary to the provisions in the trustees. You see, it comes back again, you must know what's in the trustees. The remedy commonly used by aggrieved beneficiaries is to sue the trustees personally for any loss to the trust. Personally. So it's the beneficiaries against you and all you own. An action against a trustee for loss suffered due to a breach of trust is normally a personal action against a trustee, and the legal remedy must be pursued before any proprietary remedy can be made by the court. A trustee is liable only for his own breaches of trust and not for his co-trustees. However, a trustee may be liable for the defaults of his co-trustees if he was himself at fault by allowing the trustees to carry out such action or not supervising the co-trustees.
So he was aware of it
and he let them carry on and say, y'all do whatever you want to. Or if he, let's say, if ABC Company is a trustee and LMN is a trustee, they are co-trustees. And so you have to oversee what the next one is doing to see if you're in agreement. Such a case was seen in Bain versus Hughes, where the trustee allowed a matter to remain in the hands of a co-trustee without inquiry. So this word inquiry is what a lot of people forget in law. You and I could be responsible for making sure that she reads that book. Right? So I tell you, I'll check on her, I'll see. But we are co-trustees. You have a responsibility to inquire from me whether or not she's doing what she's supposed to do.
I was supposed to do it. Well,
if I'm telling you, okay, I'll take care of her, but we are supposed to be co. You have to make an inquiry. Because you and I must be on the same page. I must know what you're doing. So that both of us can speak from the same hymn sheet. And there's no vicarious liability in the law of trust. In common law and in contract law, there is vicarious liability, which is liability through the actions of someone else. You understand what I mean?
Yes.
The actions of someone else. So
you're driving the company vehicle and you get in an accident. The company is liable through the actions of the employee.
Yeah,
right. So that is why you say,
so whatever you do,
the actual person, yeah. But don't forget, if it's a company, they're going to sue the company. Because the company is an individual in law. Remember that.
lets the company have you state any accident. Could they do that?
What?
Give you something to sign and they state if you say get in an accident or misuse the company's vehicle, you responsible?
You can still sue the company,
No.
and then the company then must claim back from the employee.
Because the
Yeah,
law.
the law says it's law. You cannot run from your responsibilities. So after the accident, the company has to pay $5,000. It's gonna take it from you
They do it
and
all
terminate
the
you.
time, all the time.
Oh yeah.
Take it from you and then
Take it.
terminate you.
But even so, where I work and I see that, I tell like business owners, you're not supposed to do that, and I tell the employees, you're not supposed to let your employer take advantage of you like that.
No,
They purchase insurance for a reason,
exactly.
so why I say
They need to claim on the insurance.
Exactly.
That is the purpose of the insurance, to
Yeah.
protect the company from that loss.
So they could be claiming and getting your money.
No, they claim it and they terminate
the
you.
guy said they gonna take it out of my paycheck. I say you cheaper you quit.
Mhm.
No, but I understand what you're saying. It's like
But you have
still getting
insurance.
an extra 5,000 because they're taking it from your paycheck. And
But
your
do they
due
still claim?
diligence, and then they claim
Yes.
it.
So they claim and take it from his salary.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Yes.
no,
So you
that's
can put 'em
jail
in-
work.
So you can put them in court.
That
right?
is
So
theft.
he could sue them.
You can sue. You should sue them.
I
No,
told-
it's
I-
not to sue.
I
If
told
you
the
claim
owner,
insurance, then why are you taking it from my salary?
This is what happened.
You should be reprimanded as an employee.
See?
You
This
see what
is
I'm
why
saying?
they
So
don't-
you
they-
shouldn't drive for a year or whatever it is, or we take you off this driving
Right.
duty, or you were so reckless.
Mhm.
We don't want you anymore in this function, or we give you a different function. But you cannot claim insurance and take it from the employee's side. Oh no,
The
that's double
government-
dipping.
The government does it all the time.
That should not happen.
When the police officers write off the car, it's an accident. They say, well, you should have been. If the officer is at
You should have
fault,
been more aware.
they just take it out their salary.
And claim?
Well, they only have third party.
Oh, that's different. So they have
See,
to take the
because
difference.
remember the government used to have comprehensive and it's too expensive, so
Mhm.
they switched it to third
So they probably
party.
take the difference.
But still, that's wrong.
They probably take the difference. Depends on the value of the car.
No, it doesn't matter if it's an accident.
Yeah, but an accident is an accident. But when people just do things for speeding around and
Mhm.
yeah, no. Just terminate them.
This thing of made is right off the cars a lot.
Yes. The police always doing it. I see it every day. They'll ride around. They'll have the lights on, no sound. So how are people supposed to know?
Just
do it all
last
the
night
time.
they was doing that when I was out.
Sometimes the car siren ain't waiting.
And the thing about
Yeah.
it is, he's zooming through and like it was oncoming traffic. And I saw where the person had to like completely stop. Only lights give way. That little when they honk down,
Mhm.
that's what probably got the alert
Yeah,
of the person.
They do it all
And
the
they was
time.
able to stop to let him swerve through.
There's
But-
an ambulance driving around on here with no sound.
They always, I see that. That's why I
They
always
need to
look at
get. They
my.
need to get those little
No,
battery.
Guys always
just
put
like
on my-
that,
The little battery operated one where they put on top of the cars. That's what they need.
That's why I always look at my rearview mirror, make sure. And then boys and they on the motorcycle too. Those ones. Oh my god.
So where there is a breach of trust, all the trustees will be liable, since liability is joint and several. Which means that any one trustee can be held liable for the loss caused by the breach of trust. However, there are circumstances when individual trustee has particular duties and responsibility and may be liable for greater contribution for the loss. So if you look at it like that too. If you're a trustee and you have a responsibility that is more than the other, you could bear more of the loss.
What is upset me is a lot of people that could be sued for their actions, but I mean, if I in the case of what she was saying, if he wanted to take that to court now, that would be just a waste. Like how would he be able to carry that through to say, by law, you're not supposed to take my funds?
Because
Oh,
for
yeah.
him, because that means the insurance company would have to breach some confidentiality for him to have known that they claim insurance.
No.
So
No.
how would the
I'm not talking
employee
about that.
know is that? You know what I mean? How would the
They're
employee know?
officers. They have to report everything that happens, and everything goes through the.
No, but she
traffic
was
department.
meaning
He's talking
For the
about the
individual
employee
case,
now who
right.
wants to go to the tribunal. to say that they have taken this money out of his salary,
In
but they're
addition
also
to
being paid
claiming
and being reimbursed by the insurance policy.
That means then that could be a whole case, cause the company could then go and sue the
So how-
insurance
so she's
for
saying,
breach
how
of
would he know that?
confidentiality.
That the company was paid.
Right, from insurance.
It's two different scenarios. Like I said, they don't have comprehensive no more, so there's no way for them to claim for the loss of their own. However, if somebody, they don't, I know for a fact, they don't ask you to pay back what the insurance company paid other people, third parties. That if their vehicle is damaged, because it's only in third party, you want their money back. You have to pay for that, but that's still wrong.
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't
wrong.
tell you put your car in third party. You were being cheap and put it in third party.
Yeah.
You put a $30,000 car on the road in third party.
But you have to pay back for the full value?
Yes.
Oh no.
That's what really,
Oh,
that's
no.
what really baffling me
You take
because
that
it's
for
like
court?
There are officers out there that
Oh no.
they believe that because the accident was their fault, they have to give the government back a $30,000.
No, but
No.
they should know that that's the company. I tell me drive this car, you know. That you have to take that.
You have to take
that
that.
risk. Yes, that's that on you.
It's happening.
But I mean, this is what I'm trying to figure out. How do you even go about?
It's happening.
putting
I don't
that
know what they get.
What you mean? Because like, you could say.
I
but
should tell them from the jump. You're
quite
gonna be
frankly,
sick.
I don't know what you
See,
do, right? But how you
No,
do
but
it as a
but
third
guess what?
party.
But guess what? Guess what? You don't have to know what they're in. You know. You can go to court and say.
It
"Why
ain't
is
it's
my
not-
contract
it's
taken
not-
out?"
it's not- This is what it is.
It'll be the other side to say, this is the policy of the company, and this is what's required, and then you come back and ask, did you clean?
There are a lot of people being taken advantage of.
Well, they
That's all
may
I
be
say.
seeking legal advice. They're not a litigious set of
to be
people.
taken advantage of. People just tell you some things, you work for them, and then you sit down and be like, okay, they say I have to do this, and they don't
I already
question
worked here for 20
anything.
years. I only have
No, it's
20
just
more
we
to
don't
go.
know. We don't have enough information to know our rights and
No, but
what we
The
can do.
information there, you
But
already read it.
No,
Yes,
but
it's written
he
here, but
don't
not
do
as
But
far
does
as
it make
going
sense?
court. And doesn't
Some of them things in the policies don't make sense.
Exactly, and they don't question anything, just as simple as us, right? We working, right? They tell us we have the government of this mentorship program that they have for teachers who started in less than 3 years. So from 1 to 3 years, they have a mentorship program that they say you have to go to. First of all, it's called mentorship. If you are a trained teacher, why are you telling me I have to go to this because I won't get confirmed? This don't have nothing to do with confirm. And then you need to hear the little young teachers.
All that is
saying,
to not
yeah,
pay you what you're
child,
supposed to get paid.
yeah, child, y'all
Just-
better come go. I say y'all don't even think you
All
have
that
to
is
come
to
to
stall,
this.
to
This
stall
after
your pay
our-
for 3 years.
first
That's
of
all
all-
it is.
Yeah.
First
Put a cap
of
on it
all-
'cause
Yeah.
you need guidance.
First of all, it's after your work hours. That's the first thing. Second of all, it's mentorship is voluntary. It's not like a must that you have mentorship. Because if that was the case, then you should have hired me on the grounds of already having mentorship.
Yeah,
Or
but
it
if
should
you
have been
don't-
a contract that in order for you to take this job, you should have mentorship. But it shouldn't have to do anything because confirmation's supposed to be a 1 year probation. So going to this mentorship can't interfere
That's
with
for
your
you to stall your pay
That's
for
all
3
your
years. That's all
Take
it
them to
is.
court.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I do it just to avoid all the long things, but it's just
Take 'em
that
to court.
Bahamians
But that's
just
the
don't
case.
do anything
Take them to
when
court.
you could know
Take them to
better.
court because certain practices they put in place don't make any sense.
Have one of
Exactly.
your lawyer friends write them a letter and wait on us and see what they say.
And then you take them to court.
That's what they do.
That's the only way you can get change in this country. If everybody just stays quiet, nothing
That's what I'm saying.
changes.
Bahamians don't do anything. Everybody is just saying, "Oh, they say we have to do this, so let's do this." But no one is be like, "This don't make sense." Like, but why you
Well,
mean
first
we
of
have
all,
to do this? You
They
know what I
don't
mean?
read. They don't read the rights or whatever. They go over what, like most people who give a contract, what they jump up and say is, okay, this only stating that you got to work a certain amount of years. Okay, I got the full summary. Let me sign. They don't read that, and then sometimes these are subject to change. So whatever the rights you reading,
2 seconds.
if I say it's subject to change, they could change that at any moment in time. to the effect of if it's gonna cause the company problem. So once you say that, you incorporate.
Come, let's wrap up quick. She has to go though. You know.
Funeral, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I'm so we can talk with exam before she go. So everybody will pay their fair share. And then be ready then over to the new trustee, because you have a duty. If you're new trustee, to make sure that everything is in order. If you're replacing an existing trustee, you also have that duty, because you have to make sure that there's been no breach of trust. If you are a retiring trustee, you remain liable for any breaches that are committed during your tenure in office, so you don't get away with anything. Section 23 of the Act provides trustees with the opportunity to insure themselves and pay insurance premium for the trust fund for liability in the administration of the trust, but that does not cover breach of trust. And the Trustee Act also gives trustees certain protections against liability for loss suffered by the trust due to their agents or their own actions, provided that they were honest and reasonable and they did it in good faith. A trustee who is liable for breach of trust may seek some relief from liability if the terms of the trust instrument allow them to do so. He may be indemnified by his beneficiaries if they consent, or there has been some act on the part of beneficiaries in which they have participated in the breach. So say if you're about to do something, you ask the beneficiaries, can I go about in doing this? Even knowing that what they're going to do is in a breach of the terms, and if that beneficiary says, yes, go ahead, then he's also liable. And the last section I have is on arbitration. When there is a dispute within the trust, the normal process now is to go through arbitration. So now let's talk about the exam. I don't like multiple choice, but if you want it, you can have it. And it won't be that many. I love filling the blanks, but you may not like them either.
Well,
and then there are short answers, and then there are essay questions. So what's your preference?
Explain the essay question for us. What's expected, how long?
You know how long is a 3-hour exam?
I mean, how much will
I
it
don't do
be?
well
How
with
much
essay
questions?
questions.
I thought we were having all of the above. I thought we were having like all of like some.
You want all of that?
Mixture.
No.
I thought this was a mixture.
No.
I like multiple
What you
choice
want?
because it gives me a retract of information that I read. So once I go back and say, oh, I remember this, and I don't know what y'all do.
What you want?
I like multiple choice.
Damn.
Why you don't like multiple choice?
Because students get them all wrong.
It's not as straightforward as you think. You just either right or wrong. That's it.
Well, the thing about it is, when you have the questions, it's the way they word it. People is worded exactly what it. It's just the way you word it.
Yeah, some multiple choices be easy, but then some is be hard. They say put couple possible answers there.
They put the couple possible answers, but then there's to be
Trust me,
one of the
if you
two that
take
is so
one accounts
so much
class
alike.
I take, you would hate multiple choice. You would rather explain something and get at least 2 out of 5 points. My teacher, she used to put the mother said.
Okay, so finals. For finals, I could ask you to, like an essay question could be like, don't write it yet because I ain't write the exam. I said I could ask you to discuss 5 duties of a trustee. Or I could ask you to discuss or explain what is meant by the term a fiduciary duty of a trustee.
Okay, I like
You see what I'm saying? Those are like essay type questions.
But then
No long.
yeah,
You
it
answer
could
the
be
question.
long. Just answer.
They can be bullets.
I mean like a
No,
page.
no bullet.
No, I'm just asking because
No bullets.
some people
No bullets.
do say bullet. Okay, it's that.
No bullets.
No. She wants a full
A
essay.
full essay. Now, if you're running out of time and you put bullets and that's your last question, I will know. Because they will tell me, whoever's invigilating, that this person was the last person. They ran out of time. You know bullet.
But how much questions we looking at? That's all.
Depends on what you want.
If you were to get all essay or all short answers.
You
or
could do
something.
essays and short answers.
How much questions?
I may give. Out of 100, give you 5 questions.
See, I thinking like insurance exam.
5 questions.
That means each question
That
is
means
20 points.
questions is
No, it don't
No.
start off that way.
No.
Like the first 2 pages will be multiple choice, and then they'll have a page of short answer, and then they'll have 4
Yeah, I
pages
thought
of
it would
essay.
just be a mixture.
The last 4 questions on the exam is always like your answer will be a minimum of 1 page.
Mm-hmm.
Of 1 page.
I ain't used to that.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't used
Have
to
you
that.
ever had it where I know
No.
sometimes
No,
you take an
I
exam,
just used to
they'll have like a
strictly
list of
multiple choice
subjects
and
and
then
it'll
Because
you
you've
get
been in
short
school in
answers.
the
two
States.
to write an essay about. It'll be like that.
Wait, my college
Yeah, that's what she's saying.
My college exams is all multiple choice and then like
You're going to college in the USA.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why you
Yeah.
should try going to UB then.
Yeah, all the UK, there's no multiple choice.
Multiple choice. You press
That-
it.
And even in Canada, there's no multiple choice. My son
Multiple,
today write essays and papers.
multiple
Plenty.
in the
choice.
States,
You gotta think.
everything you could have 100 questions on multiple choice.
And then there's
And
just-
it is be so easy. I take a course to the States with Darren, right? A certification. It's literally be that easy. Read the bullet point in the
Think
book.
so?
So you want essays, short
I
answers.
prefer a mixture.
Yeah, I thought
Multiple
just be a
choice,
mixture.
short answer, and then I don't know, one essay
Yeah, I
question.
prefer a mixture.
Multiple choice?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. You
Fill in
just
the
say
blanks.
nobody's scared of mine.
The first, how about the first 10 questions, multiple choice?
That's
So
a lot.
It's 10.
Now that's a lot. I can tell you that now.
It's 10.
Some people asked for that before. First 10 points, so out of 100 and you get none. You drop down to 90.
Oh Jesus.
That's why
See,
you
you
take
only
that
make-
chance.
We tried to wait with you.
But I'm just looking at
But
experience
maybe
and
do
writing
essay,
multiple
right?
choice.
Wouldn't you guide us? When you say next week you will guide
Yeah, I
us.
can
on
guide
what
you
to
for multiple
focus
choice.
on.
Multiple choice, you're on your
Essays
own.
could be easy, yeah.
See, y'all,
So just
y'all good at
just a
writing
couple
and
multiple
elaborating.
choice.
As a man, I want to go straight to the point.
Even if I give you 5 multiple choice at 2 points each, at 10 points.
Yeah. So you,
It's
so
10
you
points
gotta
you've
make
lost.
That's a lot then.
What about
Roughly.
Yeah.
What about those
'Cause if you get
exams where
something
it's
in
like,
that multiple choice,
you have a list of words,
Multiple choice just be one
right?
point.
A list of words,
Yeah.
like
What are you
You
talking
fill
about?
in-
No,
She's not gonna
No.
do that. No.
No, don't even go there.
Fine.
So what you want? I don't know what you're talking about.
yes, it's almost like
Fill in
you
the
have
blank. It's
primary
like
box.
multiple
You have a
choice.
box.
That's primary
I didn't
school.
do well on that one.
No, they do that in university. You know, they give you like a group of words and you have to put A, B, C, D, like that.
Oh, you mean where they have a list of the words up top and they
Yeah, A, B,
No.
C, D, E, F, G, and then you just have to fill in. Okay, this
It
is
sounds like they're going to a fair carnival.
No.
No.
No, I just said I
No, she could
understand
do
what
that.
he's saying.
No.
I try to say that's the I just said that.
Don't lie, that was good though. I mean, if you had it before,
I
you'd
know an
understand
essay
how
just
easy
not
that
a
is.
20-point essay. That's written down
Sometimes they
there.
put it words that
Insurance
are
exam, they'll give you a scenario, a whole scenario, what happened.
But you may only write 8 sentences.
No.
No, I mean for
That's
this
it for
exam.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, child, Sally's house burned down. She then went this place and that place and that place. Please explain what Sally should have done. And then when Sally went to court, you just be like, what?
Mhm.
Boy,
Yeah.
it's frustrating.
But see, this is trust 1, so I don't expect that much. When you get to trust 2, it builds on this. So it's more.
So
what I'm
it
saying?
is
Your
no
answer will
hard
be
essay.
more in depth. You see what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Right. There's only trust 1.
How far Korean wise get to trust one?
Not far.
Far, no.
You see what I'm saying? Because I expect now that when you answer me a question, if I do an essay on fiduciary duty,
Mhm.
I know you only can go as far as what's
But
in
it's
here.
right.
Okay.
When you do trust 2, trust 3, you
gotta
know
come
much
back-
more.
you gotta
What
come
is
back to
trust
this
three?
one.
Yeah, it's all of it.
What is
It's all
trust
of it.
3? I thought it was only 2 bars.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's only 2 parts. Within the 2 parts, there are two
Two,
modules. So what it is, I have essay, I have short answers.
Multiple choice.
I don't have a problem with essay or short answers. However,
I hope you come back to see if you
And
get
I'm
the
giving you
multiple
all a
choice right.
mandatory question.
You will why come back?
To check and make sure you got multiple choice, just what you asking for, right?
just like with the insurance exam, because the insurance book like the stick, like they'll tell you what to focus on. They'll give you a sheet of paper and say, well, okay, focus on chapter 3 and 4, focus on, and each year is different. So the next year, their focus chapters will be different.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you a guide, like, okay, I know
But
I don't
she
have to
said she
spend
I
too much
give you
time.
that next week.
Yeah,
She said she
okay.
giving us
Next
the
week you only come in
That's
for the
fine.
guide.
That's fine.
So how much points?
But there's
is
no
the-
guide for multiple choice.
How much points?
Cyril, you sure you want this multiple
How much
choice?
points is the mandatory?
You could
I'll do
actually
points,
get
I'll
your
figure that
guide and
later.
go and write out your essays before the exam.
You could bring in a guy.
No,
No,
you write
No,
it
you
before,
write
even
it
before.
before and have it in your head.
Yeah.
And she saw like her multiple choice.
What is
When I write it,
it?
I'll
like
tell
it?
you. When I write it, I'll tell you. This is when I write a mandatory question, even if I make it 2 questions, it's on 2 things I think you need to know from the class in totality. Like 2 main points that I need to know that you
So
understand.
are they essays? That's what I want to know.
They may be essay, they may be scenario, but they're on the topics that I think you need to know.
Well, you know what?
And then I can give you the choice between the other essays.
From your
And then a
experience
choice
teaching
from
the course,
short
what you
answers.
think are the best type questions for students? Where do
Essay and
students
short
perform
answers.
better?
Well, I think we should
Essay
go
and
with
short
that.
answer.
Multiple choice? No. Fill in the blank? No.
At least you get
You need
some
a study
points.
buddy?
You get some
You get
points.
some points.
And then I can understand when you write, I can
I see
understand
this.
where
We
you
could
go
schedule
wrong.
something, we could
You see what I mean? To say, okay, she got it, but she mixed this up.
just say which they
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
A multiple choice is 1A,
That's it.
2C,
Right.
4D, wrong, and I put 0 there and then move on to the next
That's
section.
And I can show you.
Then you have to do a reset.
Wow.
What you think?
Call you.
What you think?
You want to
What
study
you
what?
thinking?
Well, she's saying essays and short answers.
We could get a group going on
Isn't
WhatsApp.
it? If we do multiple choice, I don't think it
This is
should
how you
be
pass
like
university?
the whole lot. It should just be, let's see, 4
Trust
points or
fund.
something like that.
Say
We
4
can't-
points.
We can't afford to lose. We can't afford to lose.
You can't afford to lose points. It's a 70 to pass this exam.
Could we get half points if you leading towards
In a multiple choice?
And
No, not a multiple choice.
is
I'm
a
talking
very
about
wrong. Short answer.
Yeah, short answers. That's what I'm saying. You get more opportunity to get points because let's say if you mix 2 things together, I wouldn't give you 0. You see what I mean? I say, okay, they're mixing 2 different things together. Now, if you write it and you just off course completely, that's a different story.
Did you do your degree?
information technology, IT.
Yeah. So, that's what it is. So, next week, come prepared. You should already started studying.
Put trust course next year.
Short answers or essay? How much questions you?
I know.
So you could tell us by next week.
Okay.
And the focus point.
So, when you come, you should have already started to study. You know what are the main sections. They're on the board.
That's all sections we're talking about.
Mean sections.
I'm just looking at
That something may be on accounting, but these are mean. This was telling me the types of trust. No.
Okay, duties is mean.
I could give you something on validity of a trust.
That's not a
Accounting is mean.
Yep, you have to know this. This one. I could give you one here, because this is on the breach. You know one could be here. One probably will be here.
See, I like this. What you're doing now,
You see?
saying here.
That's next week class.
Right, okay, sweet class.
No, I'm saying
So
for you
you
to
write
get
the
ready.
test before next week.
Yeah.
So you have it to know.
So I can tell you where to focus.
Okay.
So I don't need when I come next week and I say there's a question that's concerning the duties of a trustee, know what the duties are and the powers that they should carry out in the event there is a breach of trust and what's the remedy. You shouldn't be looking at me blank.
Okay.
Because I already told you they link together.
Okay.
So you need to start reading this chapter again if you don't know it by heart. You see what I mean? I may give you a question as this is a trust that is being created.
Mhm.
These are the things that the settler wants to do has a valid trust being created. You should know what these are and the cases to go with it. Because you got to tell me which one didn't meet this, which certainty and why.
Okay.
See them here?
Gotcha.
That sounds interesting.
So that's how the questions will be. So it's not difficult, you just have to know. Or someone wants to remove a trustee, or a trustee wants to retire. I may ask a question about their liability. Or there could be been a breach of trust, and this trustee could have already retired. What are their liabilities? Who will the beneficiary sue? What can a beneficiary hope to get? What are the remedies? Those kind of questions. All right? So for those who didn't come, I don't know.
Sometimes if the job pays for it and you don't pass, they take that out your paycheck. So
Yes, they do. It's automatic.
that happening.
Child, like passing it. I get no money to waste.
Okay, I got that. So I'll find out from him. If you could get one.
Oh yeah, you get it from
Yeah.
Junior and ask Junior.
Okay.
So we good?
Yes.
I can erase the board? Alright.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Let me move it so you get someone didn't get to talk. I don't think you could see the top. Okay. Alright. And then the far end. Uh-oh.
Sorry.
Come.
Gee, it's still, you know?
Yeah. No, I'm trying to make sure they have everything on the board. If they don't have it, you have a picture, right? You have a good picture?
I took a picture of it.
Okay. No, in case they can't see it on the